Hi, and thanks for coming back. Alright, I have all of my blocks finished. I've embroidered them on the embroidery machine, and I've trimmed off my blocks. I've trimmed them all down so that there's a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now, when I talked about leaving your seam allowances before, in the instructions for the embroidery designs, they tell you to trim your batting back because the traditional method for joining these blocks would be to make a seam. And when you're done with a seam with embroidered blocks, you have a lot of bulk. I don't like that bulk. So this is one of the reasons why I developed this build-as-you-go quilting method. Because of the way I join these blocks, you don't have to do any grading of your seams, you don't have to trim your batting back, because we're not going to be overlapping our seams, we're going to be butting them together. So this is going to be the next step that I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you how to join the blocks. When I join my blocks, I'm using a product called Heat Press Batting Together. This product was developed originally for the long arm quilter. It enabled the long arm quilter to use all of those little bits and pieces and scraps of fabric by fusing them together using the heat press batting tape. The nice thing about this tape is it was developed specifically for the quilter and specifically for batting, so the hand quilter can use it and the machine quilter can use it. It won't gum up your needle. It's made from a very thin tricot knit fabric. It has a fusible side on the back. The most important thing about this product is it has been pre-shrunk. You can't just go use an interfacing and cut it to the width you want and put it on your quilt backs, because the interfacing has not been pre-shrunk, and you will see a big difference in your precision if you use a product that wasn't developed especially for quilting. So I use, and I prefer the heat press batting product. There are several products out there, but this is my favorite. It's available in 1.5 inches, which is what we're going to use for this demonstration. And they also have it available in 3/4 inch width. And when we go to put the border on and add the borders, we'll be using the 3/4 inch width, and I'll show you how that works for that technique as well. So I have my quilt arranged, I have all my blocks arranged how I want them to be finished. And now I start taking my blocks 2 at a time and flipping them over to the back side. They've all been pre-trimmed and are sized very well. And we just lay the batting tape down and we fuse that onto the blocks. And then just cut it away. And now these blocks are butted together perfectly. So then I'll take the next block and do the same thing. I'm just going to kind of press that down real quickly. And we're just going to, again, lay our batting tape and fuse it down. This doesn't require a super hot iron. You can use steam, or you don't have to use steam. If you make a mistake, you simply warm it up and it'll pull right off for you, and it won't leave a residue on your block. But I'm just going to go ahead and secure that down and trim away, and then we go to the next block. I always check and make sure everything is the way it needs to be, because I am human, I do make mistakes. So we're going to go ahead and complete this quilt assembly by fusing all of these rows together and then attaching the rows to each other, and then I will show you how to finish it off. So there's our first row, and then I'll start with my second row and so on and so forth. And when we have this assembled, I'll be back and I'll show you how we hide our raw edges and quilt all the way through to the back. Okay, I have the whole quilt fused together with the exception of my last row. I've finished my last row here, so I need to put these last two pieces together. So I just flip my quilt over. Wanted you to see how the whole thing was done. So I just lay my row, I'm matching up my seams, and then I'm laying my batting tape down. Just kind of squeeze them together and fuse the batting tape down. And then we will go to finishing, adding the sashing and the backing. I knew they were there somewhere. Okay, and we'll true off the outside edges before we add our border. We're not going to worry too much about that. And we have our quilt top completed. Now, you will notice that you will see some little pieces of batting peeking out. Oh, this is all going to disappear. Don't worry your pretty little head about that. We're going to take care of that. So now my quilt top is done, and I'm going to get set up to add my backing and my sashing, and I'll be back. Okay, so now I've placed my backing on the back of my quilt, and I've started to secure it with pins. I don't really need to use a lot of pins because remember my blocks are already pre-quilted. And so all I'm really going to be doing now is doing some additional quilting through all of the layers so that I can secure my backing at the same time. Now, if you've purchased my first book, this step is not in there because I got smarter after I wrote my first book, and I came up with a lot of shortcuts. So there will be a second edition of the first book coming in the near future. But the near future could be months. But I am in the process of a rewrite. So the next item, the items that are absolutely essential for my build as you go method, we already talked about the heat press batting together tape. The other items that I use that I have to have are the bias tape binders, and these are what I use to make the sashing. Now I incorporate the sashing as part of my design element, so I can use whatever width I want. For this quilt I'm going to use the 3/4 inch tape maker, and with the 3/4 inch I'm going to have to cut it twice the width, so I'm going to cut it 1.5 inches, cut my strips 1.5 inches wide. So I've cut my strips 1.5 inches wide, but I don't need to cut them on the bias. I'm going to cut them on the straight, and then I also cut off one of my edges at a point. It kind of helps me to figure out. It kind of helps me to get it started. So I start the point in there, and the wrong side is going to be to the bottom. Boy, the nice thing about these batiks is that you can get away with murder because it's really hard to tell the right side from the wrong side. I love batiks. I use batiks all the time. Most of the time, that's what I use. So I've started my fabric through the tape maker, and I just kind of get it situated. And then I go to the iron and start pressing and pulling the tape maker through. So I'll get my iron set, and steam helps, hot heat, and you just continue to pull this through until you've gone the entire length of the strip. And I have 8 strips here that I need to do to complete the quilt top. So I'm not going to bore you with that, but I wanted you to see how this works, because when I do my classes and in my travels and in my store, the first question everybody asks is, how do you use these things? And they're wonderful tools. Okay, so I'll finish making my tapes, my sashing, and then we'll come back.